If you want to change the past and ultimately your future, you're going to need to understand how memory works, specifically memory reconsolidation. George Santayana says, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." Another way of saying this would be the best way to not change a memory would be to never bring it up. So the best way to not change the past will be to never bring it up. And in doing so, repeating the same unconscious patterns. Or as Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. People resist going into the past, and I get it, but it's that which keeps you stuck. The key distinction here is how to do it skillfully. So we're going to talk about explicit and implicit memory. Explicit memory, if you remember back to school, is remembering the first 10 presidents. Implicit memory is the memory that becomes automatic, like riding a bike or driving a car. You don't have to think about it. Your body just knows how to do it. The memory's inbuilt. For the longest time, mainstream science believed that implicit memories could not be changed and that they were fixed. It wasn't until the early 2000s when neuroscientists began to push back against this and to begin to come up with some new tests and experiments to really test this hypothesis. They were asking bigger questions like, can implicit memory be changed? And if so, how? And they actually began some of those experiments. So the first experiment they did, they linked up a fear response to a bell so that when the bell went off, the mouse had a fear response to the bell. For you, this trigger response might be when someone speaks to you with a certain tone, or maybe that it's a certain subject that someone brings up, or maybe it's the idea of jumping on social media or speaking in front of a group that brings up this fear or trigger response. So back to the study. What they did next was that they put a chemical protein blocker between the fear and the fear response in the mouse's brain. And when they did this, they realized that the fear itself went away. Now, this was groundbreaking because what this proved is that implicit memory can be changed. The memory trigger can be reconsolidated, which was a huge breakthrough for our understanding of memory and also a huge breakthrough for change work. That's really important for you and I because this means that we can change our implicit unconscious memories. So what has to happen is whatever's causing you pain or fear, or maybe it's something that you're wanting to step into in your life, but there's some resistance there, there's fear there, there's something in your implicit memory that is preventing, blocking, or causing you challenge. Now, the reason that this can be difficult at times is because we might not want to re-feel some of those experiences. And I really get that. However, in order for change to work, we need to be able to reconsolidate that memory, which means that it has to be brought up. So for you, that might be fear of intimacy. It could be something around money, love, relationships, business, whatever it is that you're wanting. Wherever those fears are coming from, they have to be brought up to the surface so that they can be reconsolidated. And then the next part of the pattern is that they have to have a disconfirming experience. So if there is a fear around intimacy, that fear has to come up and then it has to be held differently. So if there's a fear of intimacy as you're being more intimate and revealing that, feeling that yourself, if that's held with care, compassion, encouragement, then that memory itself would be reconsolidated with a different emotional tone. This isn't just conceptual, so we can't just bring it up into the mind and just kind of bring it back down neutrally. To do this really skillfully, you want to bring the memory up, and then it wants to be met with a disconfirming emotion or a reconfirming emotional experience, and then it gets reconsolidated, packaged back down, and then restored in a different way. Now, this is why working with a coach or a therapist who is skilled is really powerful because they hold this container when it's done skillfully. So you bring a memory up, it gets held differently with the therapist or the coach. You have a disconfirming or reconfirming experience. Oh my God, when I shared that, there was no guilt, shame, there was care, there was compassion. That memory then gets stored in the body differently. You have a different emotional experience, so it gets stored differently. So growing up, I had a volatile stepfather, and I would witness that volatility in the house, sometimes directed towards my mother.
So there was stored implicit memory happening. So as I grew up and I was maybe 18, 19, 20, kind of like a young man, and I would see people when I was out partying, putting aggressive energy towards another woman, I would have an implicit memory response, an overactivation towards seeing a situation like that wasn't relative. It wasn't a relative response based on what was actually happening. That's because my implicit memory was being triggered to that situation, and that rage and anger was coming up as a protective response. And it felt terrible afterwards because it felt like my system had been hijacked. Like I didn't choose to feel that way. So to consolidate this implicit memory, I had to do healing work in relation to men and specifically my stepfather. So I had to go through my own healing journey and to heal and refeel all of the repressed anger that I was feeling through all of those experiences so that I could bring those memories up and that they could be refelt. You know, as they say, you got to feel it to heal it. That's what that means. So you got to bring it up, felt in a new context, and then it was restored. And now I do not have that response at all. So similar to the mouse, once those proteins have been added, once that block has been added and it's been reconsolidated in a different way, then those responses no longer exist. They no longer happen. So imagine that all of your implicit memories exist in zipped folders inside of a computer. And what we do is we unzip the folder, which allows us to see more data so you can see the file. And then inside of that file, for whatever emotion that is, it could be fear, anxiety, it could be public speaking, speaking in a group. Inside of that folder will be a document with all of the memories. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into that folder and we're going to rewrite the folder in a new way. And then we're going to restore it back into the file, and then it's going to get zipped back down, and that implicit memory goes back into the system. So whatever this is for you in terms of the change work that you're doing or want to do, whether that's around relationships, money, sex, love, whatever it is for you, as you do work around whatever that context is, it goes back in and it changes and it updates the rest of the subfolders, and you no longer have the response to whatever it is that you're working with. So you no longer have that response, and that itself is real change.